The Charlotte Post Publishing Company, publisher of the Triangle Tribune and the Charlotte Post Black History Month. Black trivia, did you know? Why do we have Black History Month? Black History Month was created to focus attention on the contributions of African Americans to the United States. It honors all Black people from all periods of U.S. history, from the enslaved people first brought over from Africa in the early 17th century to African Americans and living in the United States. Dr. Charles Richard Drew. Dr. Drew was a medical doctor and surgeon who started the idea of a blood bank. Drew Project was the model for the Red Cross system of blood banks, of which he became the first director. Do you know Sarah E. Good invented the folding cabinet bed, a space saver that folded up against the wall into a cabinet. When folded up, it could be used as a desk, complete with compartments for stationery and writing supplies. Good owned a furniture store in Chicago, Illinois, and invented the bed for people living in small apartments. Good's patent was the first one obtained by an African American woman inventor. Patent number 322177, approved on July 14, 1885.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Nichelle Spears and I will be one of your hosts for this evening. And I would like to welcome you to the After Lockdown. Is Life After Incarceration Just Another Prison? Hosted by the Charlotte Post Foundation. Before we get started, I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. Will you please open your chat and your Q&A windows? A diagram has been made for you on the computer at this time. During this webinar, if you have any questions for our panelists, please type them in the Q&A only. The chat will be locked. So this is where you will be able to communicate with the panelists during the conversation. The chat window will only be used for our team to communicate all of the various resources of today's webinar and ways to support the Charlotte Post, the Triangle Tribune, and the Post Foundation. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our other host, Linda Johnson.
Thank you, Nichelle. My name is Linda Johnson, and I am one of the hosts this evening, along with Nichelle Spears. We have with us Gerald Johnson, CEO and publisher, president of the Charlotte Post Publishing Company, along with Herbert White, editor-in-chief. We thank you and welcome you to our program this evening. Let me tell you a little bit about the Charlotte Post Publishing Company. We are minority owned and operated and has served as a dominant force in educating, empowering, and enlightening African American communities throughout our 8 counties since 1878. Each week we publish community newspaper, the Charlotte Post, on Thursday, and the Triangle Tribune, serving Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and Cary, North Carolina. We are a multimedia company, digital, events, newsletters, newspapers, e-edition, print, and social media. So take a look at our social media sites and connect with us there, along with podcasts and webinars. This project tonight is made possible for the Pulsar Center. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Gerald Johnson. Thank you. Gerald, you're on mute.
It's a little hard to turn it over to me if I'm on mute. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm looking forward to this conversation with our panelists. We have, but before I say that, I want to make sure that, again, we give the Pulitzer credit It's through their funding that made this particular after lockdown project possible. So I want to thank them again for their support. And now I want to introduce the panelists that are here, and I'm just a great panelist for this conversation. Starting off with Herb White. He's the editor-in-chief, Charlotte Post newspaper, and he was the reporter and manager of the After Lockdown reporting series. Patrice Funderburg, executive director, Center for Community Transition, Incarceration, and Reentry. And Sechelle McNeil, formerly incarcerated, but now an entrepreneur and owner of Washroom Laundry. This is going to be an interesting conversation, and when you have questions, you can post them in the Q&A. And let's get started. And I want to start off with Herb. And Herb, this is a first name basis only. I don't believe in the Mr. and Mrs. thing in these conversations. So just please refer to me as Gerald if you want to talk to me. And I'm
absolutely
first name. But Herb, let's kick this off with you. And before I'm interested in how did you come up with this project that you wanted to do on After Lockdown? I mean, what was the impetus to get you interested in doing this series?
Well, thanks for having me along, first of all, and thanks again to the Pulitzer Center for their support. This project is I guess the best answer is to leave it on 2 tracks, because at the Post, we've done reporting over the years on people who were formerly incarcerated and incarcerated, and how programs and law enforcement tried to help folks make that transition or prepare themselves to make that transition from incarceration back into civilian life. And most of our reporting was on that end, when folks were behind bars and trying to get themselves prepared to get out into the real world. But I got an email from Michael Watkins, who lives in Raleigh last year, and he basically laid out his life story, or at least his adult life story, where he was convicted of breaking and entering in 1988 and spent the next 33 years working low wage, dead end jobs, and was homeless for a good chunk of that time and was just miserable. And he, to his credit, he never reoffended. He stayed the course, worked as best he could, and struggled with the things that a lot of people struggle with, housing, job, and employment/income. And he decided one day that he was going to go back to college. And he did that. He enrolled at Campbell University, earned his bachelor's degree in 2021, enrolled in a master's program, and finally landed a job that paid a living wage. Now, this job is all the way out in Portland, Oregon, where he works remotely. But he finally got on the right path. It took him 33 years to get there. And I thought that was a powerful story. And it was my aha moment in terms of, here's somebody whose story is so compelling that we can build out some reporting around this. And I talked to folks, and myself and Ashley Mahoney, we got together and went out and started talking to people who were formerly incarcerated, people who were advocates for the formerly incarcerated. And we came up with this series of stories of reporting that looked at the challenges that the formerly incarcerated face upon their release, as well as the societal issues that lead to those barriers, because there are people out there who think that once you are incarcerated, whether rightly or wrongly, that, you know, that's somebody else's problem when you get out, if you get out. And so I just thought that it was a really compelling case to explore further and expose some truths and those lives that are affected and impacted by this. And it's something that we all have to deal with, even if you've never spent a day behind bars in your life. we all have a role to play in that. And so that's where After Lockdown came from.
Okay, so tell us a few more highlights of what you found in going through the series in terms of just some highlights that just popped out at you that was, I don't want to say shocking, but sort of surprising that you just didn't know. But you
Well,
I mean, you tell me every day you know everything, so just give me a couple of.
well, the stuff I don't know, I'm going to find out. And so one of the things that wasn't necessarily surprising was that the attitudes about the formerly incarcerated, just like for the incarcerated, most of the time is colored by race. And when you look at how resources and attitudes are afforded to people who fit a certain narrative, I guess, where if you're white, male, and moneyed, yeah, you can pretty much write your ticket to get back to some semblance of normalcy. If you are a person of color, then the rules are totally different. And the thing that really stood out to me was that women who are behind bars and the formerly incarcerated, they face special challenges in terms of being able to make that transition, because a lot of times the support systems, whether they're programs or whatever, most of the time they are built for men. And so that was the one thing that really stood out for me. But in our research and reporting, the thing that really stood out is that acceptance and those opportunities that are given to people who are formerly incarcerated. A good chunk of the time, it is colored by race, economics, and gender.
Interesting. And we have Cecilia McNeil here, who has gone through this process, came out and became a success. But it wasn't an easy transition. It wasn't easy to get there. And tell us your story, Cecilia. Let us hear from you to find out. I mean, you could basically test some of what Herb said about the women coming out and that sort of thing. But tell us your story, and then I will ask some further questions before I have Patrice jump in here with all the answers.
All right, there it is. So I was convicted in August of 2013. I spent 27 months in the federal prison system, and upon my release, I was just sent home with what I had leaving prison. For me, I had an awesome support system, but in doing time, I lost a lot. I lost my child. I lost custody of my child, and was fought tooth and nail to maintain or to keep custody of her. But because of my conviction, the judge was not in my favor. While I had done everything that I needed to do, I was gainfully employed. I had a stable home environment. The judge did not find in my favor to return my daughter to me. Prior to my incarceration, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I made very, very good money. My crime was not related to my employment or my job. And upon release, I couldn't go back to that job. They didn't have a place for me. And there was nothing for me to do. I got myself together. I applied for all of these great jobs, and I landed a great interview with a great company. After the interview, they were very happy with me, extended a job offer. And a day before I was supposed to start that job, they sent me by, where you have to sign for the mail, and they rescinded the job offer. It sent me.
Now, did you find out why that was rescinded?
Well, I disclosed during my interview that I had criminal justice involvement. And the HR business partner at the time, she said that everything was okay. It wasn't related to work. And that everyone really liked me and that wouldn't be a problem within their organization. However, after they sent me the letter rescinding the job offer, I had a conversation with her and she told me that she just couldn't convince her team that I was worth the risk, worth taking the risk. And again, that sent me into a downward spiral. I suffer from very, very, very severe depression. I lost tons of weight. One of my favorite things to do is listen to music. I couldn't even listen to music anymore. I ended up working at the Waffle House, which I kind of loved. I was cooking there, but you know, going from making $100,000 a year to a couple $100 a month is it's a big deal, right? And it can do something to your self-esteem. And already walking around with this criminal justice incident on my shoulders and in my closet, now I have to disclose to everyone, you know, a little bit about my past, which even having to disclose can be difficult and can be a tool that's used against you, right? And so I was very, very, you know, determined that that wouldn't happen to me again, you know, and that I was going to do something to help other men and women that were in that situation, because it's very difficult to share your information. And then when you share it, there's no one that has any empathy for you, right? Or any, it's not sympathy that you want, any empathy, someone that can put themselves in your shoes and, you know, see something positive there.
So what, how can I put, you were doing so well. You got a biology degree from Fayetteville State. You even got a graduate degree. You're making all this money. So what was the reason for committing the crime that you did? They got you into all this. What was going through your mind when you did this?
You know, so at the time, I don't know. So at the time, I felt like I needed more. I had just kind of been separated from my daughter's father, and here we are, me and the baby girl, and we are kind of almost alone. It's just us two, and I'm trying to make it work. And I felt like I didn't have enough, and that's really it. It was nothing else. It wasn't any kind of outside pressure. In fact, my family didn't know that I had been going through a federal case until probably 2 months before I was sentenced. So I did all of that without even sharing it with my family.
Interesting story. And you came out and look at you now.
Look at me now.
We're going to roll back to you, but I want to bring Patrice in here. And Patrice, you are an advocate for this, and you all do a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean just a lot. But before you tell us all about what you do, I want to ask you this question. Let's take Shashelle, for instance. If Shashelle came and knocked on your door for help, do you help individuals that need that help immediately? Is that part of what you all do?
Absolutely. We meet people. One of the core values of the work that we do at Center for Community Transitions, not only the agency, but the people who work for the agency, is that we recognize meeting people where they are is the true value proposition in this work. As someone who has not spent time in jail or prison, and I represent the 1 in 4 people in this country who have a sibling that spent time incarcerated, it is vitally important that we center the lived experiences of the people that have these experiences. Not everybody went to prison. Some people went to county jail. Some people went to federal prison. Some people went to state prison. And everybody deserves to be seen, heard, and taken seriously based on where they come into the space.
So what else do you all do in terms of advocating? And you tell us more about what else you do to help in this whole situation, other than helping the individual directly. What else are you getting involved with?
Yeah, so the work at the Center for Community Transition actually began the year after I was born in 1974. And it was the result of a graduate student writing a paper to the then Department of Corrections about the slightly, at that time, increasing rate of men who were being released from state prisons here in the state of North Carolina, and the inavailability of resources around housing and jobs specifically. Now, what we know to be true in the world was happening, law and order was happening around that time in the early 70s. And if we fast forward to the 80s, we know the explosion of the war on drugs had a significant impact that led to mass incarceration. So CCT was at the forefront, as sort of an early adopter, if you will, of recognizing the need for housing and employment for men transitioning out of prison. What research over time has shown is that employment and housing are the strongest predictors of poverty. And what we know from the criminal justice research is that poverty is the strongest predictor of recidivism, the likelihood and the probability of rearrest. And so CCT, very much in a vacuum at the time because it wasn't the national conversation that it is today, but CCT directly and explicitly was designed as an agency in the early 70s to address employment and housing. Over the years, and Herb mentioned the impact of incarceration on women, as the explosion of women in incarceration and those rates right around the 1980s, early 1980s, when those rates started to increase, the agency recognized the need that women who had become the sole providers in their home were also now starting to experience this. And there was this generational impact. So the agency, through legislative action in the state of North Carolina, began a contract with the state Department of Corrections at the time, now Department of Public Safety, where a work release dorm was added to the agency. And together, these three components, from employment, from work release and transition pathways and alternatives to incarceration, as well as addressing the social and emotional wellness of children that are impacted by incarceration and their parents, rounded out the holistic approach that the agency still does today. So through our LifeWorks employment program, which is housed at the Goodwill Opportunity Campus and the program that Seychelle graduated from, we also have our Families Doing Time program that works with children who are enrolled in CMS schools that have an incarcerated parent or some form of incarceration happening in the home. And we also provide family reunification and stabilization supports, evidence-based, to the caregivers in the home. And thirdly, you know, some people in the community like to say I'm a prison warden. I do run a work release dorm. This is a part of our contract with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, where at our work release dorm, we have 30 women who are serving the end of their state prison sentence between 1 year and 3 years. And we provide all of those services in addition to housing for a period of time. Our ladies are not on monitors. We don't track them with chip devices or anything like that, but we provide the conditions for these women to prepare to transition back into the community. This intergenerational model is a model that can seed. It can also foster additional development around the ways in which we reimagine how we think about the criminal legal system, and specifically how we provide supports to people who have been entrapped in this system that we know has racial roots.
And in going through these stories and hearing what's going on with what went on with Seychelle, I'm just struck, and you can start off with this, but any of you can answer this in terms of going through and the reentry process. The cases are all different, but Seychelle served 2 and less than 3 years and got out. And very bright, educated, and I just have a difficult time understanding why the transition back into society was so difficult for. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. So somebody has to help me understand why that was such a difficult situation. I'm missing something here, and I'm sure I am. But what's behind that being so difficult, other than just carrying that tag that you are a prisoner, or you're a criminal, or you got out, or you did a crime, or whatever? I don't get it. Help me understand that.
Well, I think that's it, right? Just having that that past issue, right, is what it blacklists you, right, from everything, from resources or help from the state. You can't get a place to stay. Some people won't rent to you if you have a criminal record. People definitely think twice about lending to you if you have a criminal record. And it is a way to, deselect a person in the job market. It will definitely put me over here, and they won't even look at my credentials or my qualifications. They won't give me an opportunity to speak. If I'm a firm believer that if I get the opportunity to speak, they will see what you see, right? They'll see someone who's educated. They'll see someone who knows what they know about that specific thing, whatever it is. But if you don't get the opportunity to speak to people, no one will ever know, and no one will be able to be that change that you need, help you with that change that you need.
That also, I think that there's this perception among people that, in basic terms, once a crook, always a crook. And no matter how eloquent, how elegant, or how hardworking you are, there are people who are just never going to get over that. And that, unfortunately, is an opinion that's held, people who make the decisions about who to hire, who to lend to, who to enroll in their schools, and it builds upon itself. And, to me, it even comes back in different ways to the criminal justice system, because when you think about it, people who are convicted of a felony, they lose their right to vote in North Carolina. That means you can't sit on a jury, which means you're talking about eliminating people from the juries of your peers and so it kind of builds upon itself, where you've got people who are looking at it a different way. It's almost an us against them kind of thing. And it impacts all of us in one form or another.
I would agree. And I would just add, because I think oftentimes missing from the conversation is the intersectionality, the intersectional ways that this has all been happening by design, and the ways in which, largely led by media and others, the ways in which that we address structural and systemic issues in transactional ways that literally are rooted in policy and legislation make it very difficult and complex for people to identify one specific thing, right? Once you really start digging into the prison industrial complex, which is this complex system of the ways in which societal, political, and economic factors work together at play to ensure the entrapment of people who end up in that pipeline, right? And the end game is profit and power, right? And so when we have these conversations, we oftentimes find ourselves in silos of, this is about racial bias, and it absolutely is. That's in the soil of how this all got started. But then we want to separate. And as someone who spent the better part of my career in human resources, I understand. And I remember when the recruiting and selection processes were not automated, when you did have to physically look at a person's application. And as the technology continued to evolve, what we simply didn't do in the business community is take into consideration the ways in which systems and structures that were already in place would continue to entrap folks or filter out folks that have these experiences. And I think from a power standpoint, when we think about who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote in terms of disenfranchisement as a result of their involvement in the criminal legal system, and largely what that looks like from a race and gender standpoint as well, we just naturally are not thinking about, oh yeah, this population is disproportionately and adversely impacted by these years and years and years of policy decisions. Business leaders don't want to get in front of that. What one of the gifts of the current state of everything is that we're forced to contend with these issues, not in a silo, but all at the same time, right? There's this great resignation that's happening, and companies are experiencing high amounts of turnover. People are working from home. People are demanding flexible and hybrid work requirements and all the things. And employers are just not able to keep up. And so they're forced to have to deal with these untapped talent pools. And inside of dealing with these untapped talent pools requires a critical analysis of the ways that recruiting processes, the ways that law departments understand for the particular regulations for a particular industry. It's a much more micro level focus that is required, that companies and organizations are being forced to have to contend with now. And so we're here for the conversation. We've got some, skin in this game, and there's a lot of opportunity on the other side of this, right? Also at an intersectional way. So we're here for it.
So you said that they have to contend, employers have to contend with it. Are they contending with it? I mean, are we seeing any changes come about with all this? I mean, we got a labor shortage going on across the board. So are employers contending with the fact that they have to face this and doing something about it by hiring people, changing the laws, or doing any of this? Is that taking place right now?
Yeah, I can jump in.
I'm talking to you still.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's yes and no, right? So we're living in this sort of somewhat gray zone. It might be a little more of a smoky gray on this end of the spectrum, but it's somewhat of a gray zone. And so what we know to be true about industry, obviously folks have seen and heard everything going on in supply chain industry, in the manufacturing industry, in the hospitality industry, in food services, in some spaces around retail. So we've seen all of these sort of changes come during the pandemic. And many companies, right, we saw last summer, everyone had a statement about racial equity, and companies that thought they were doing the most or doing even more, they also threw in their statement about fair chance hiring and ban the box, which is truly a marketing campaign, right? When you really start to dig into that, and these are the questions that COVID has really created an opportunity for agencies and advocates and folks that have lived experience to start asking these questions differently. Great, you banned the box. How many people have you hired? How do you know? How are those people moving in the organization? Have they been able to be promoted? Are they being developed as talent? And for companies that are truly interested in getting it right, and I don't mean right in an absolute linear way, I mean right for their industry, the types of services or product that they sell, their customer base, and who they want their brand to be, these are the companies that we're pursuing. These are the companies that are in it for the long game. These are the companies that understand the value proposition and the value of the talent that has been otherwise overlooked. So yes, there are a few that are actually doing that. And there are a few in Charlotte that are actually doing that and doing that quite well. At a national level, gentrification isn't just in housing, if we keeping it all the way real. Right? You can go on LinkedIn and type in #criminal justice, and you will see a lot of people telling their stories and doing all the things who don't look like any of us in this group. And on one, from a business standpoint, if it gets the dialogue going and if it moves the work forward, then we're here for it. But the second folks who are directly impacted are not centered in those conversations, and the second those conversations don't contend with the intersectionality of how race and gender has exacerbated the mass incarceration population that we're dealing with, then you're setting yourself up to fail. That's a lot for employers to contend with. Our experience at Center for Community Transitions, I joined the organization as executive director in January of 2020 and served on the board for a couple of years prior to that. So I'm a new jet. I'm still somewhat of a rookie in this. But the companies that we're working with, have primarily been medium-sized to smaller businesses that don't have a lot of these hurdles internal with applicant tracking systems and HRIS technology systems, where there's very little to no human interaction. The companies that are of size and scale that have those technologies that are actually looking, okay, where does our system filter out the person who, in Seychelles' case, if her employment offer was an online employment offer contingent on successful completion of a background check, and she got filtered out and she never physically saw or talked to anyone, then that company is missing an opportunity for all this talent. How many other people out in the world are missing that opportunity when businesses don't even understand that that's what their system is actually creating? And oh, by the way, on the other side, on their marketing, communications, and PR, they're promoting that they're fair chance hiring employers and that they ban the box. Their results don't say that. And no one is having those questions. So I think when we start to have the questions with businesses, particularly larger businesses, we need to go into the rabbit hole. Nationally, JP Morgan Chase and Eaton Corporation have stepped up on the heels of the racial uprisings from last year and formed the Second Chance Business Coalition, which is starting to advance conversations in some of the Fortune companies, Fortune 500 and Fortune 50, I would say, particularly around financial services and some of the companies, larger corporations that are highly regulated. JP Morgan has an impressive percentage of, I think, of about 10% of their workforce are people that have criminal convictions, which again, doesn't always mean someone who has spent time in jail or prison, but again, it's that lived experience that needs to be at the center of the way employers are developing their programs, and that's going to vary by industry. In Charlotte, if I'm still keeping it all the way real, we still have a long way to go, right? Folks want to have the conversation. Folks want job-ready candidates. There are some employers that have open roles and they just want 50 people, but they don't have the process. They don't have sort of the foresight or the interest or the commitment or the political will, if you will, to truly understand what wraparound services means, right? It's a series of transactions that they want to be attached to close their open roles. And that creates harm. So when we have forums like this and we have conversations like this, it's important for us to really get provocative in the ways in which the systems are set up, right? The ways in which the systems are set up. Even if you are an employer who wants to do this right, you need to be raising your hand to say, hey, I want to go in the rabbit hole and get this right for my industry, because at the end game is seeing success, not counting the number of people that you hired and then they ended up leaving the organization in less than a year.
Yeah.
So there's a whole important conversation for businesses, and businesses in Charlotte in particular, in my experience.
So we aren't doing good as a city then, is what you're saying. Now.
Pardon, say it again?
We aren't doing well as a city in this area.
There are areas of improvement for our beloved and benevolent Charlotte.
So let's talk about some of the legal issues that are tying this down in terms of what's out there legally that's blocking people getting out, getting jobs, getting housing, and all that. We're talking about the business side of it, but what's going on with the laws that are on the books that's actually hampering this being a little more successful than it is? And let's start off with you a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean,
Hold on.
well, with the in terms of the legal parts of it, you know, legally, once you're out, once you've been released and back into civilian life, you know, that is not supposed to stop you from anything. But we all know that the criminal justice system is less than perfect. And a lot of times, you know, those barriers do show up in different types of ways. You know, even if it's a matter of recidivism, and you have to look at this from again, from a holistic standpoint, and sometimes one thing leads to another and leads to another, which leads to recidivism. And if you are someone who has a conviction in your background, the police are, rightly or wrongly, going to be looking at you a little bit harder than somebody who doesn't have that sort of background. And again, it's not supposed to happen that way, but law enforcement is going to track folks who are known to the system, and businesses can pick on that when they look at background checks. So it's not supposed to work out that way, but it works out that way.
Michelle, you want to add anything to that?
So, no, there's nothing really to add about that. And he's right? Once you are finished your time, and whatever that looks like, right? You should be free to live as everyone else, and it's just not always the case, right? That thing still haunts me. And someone asked a question about why didn't I share it with my family? It's the same reason I don't share it with anyone else. It is not a bright side. I don't want to disappoint anyone. And people treat you differently. And it sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's very abrasive, but people treat you different when they find that out about you, especially if you're in certain circles and something like that comes up and everyone is talking about the positive side of it. How could this person do that? Oh my gosh, I would never. And then it's you're looked upon differently. And that's in social circles and even familial circles as well.
Yeah, because you also have family members who say, we didn't raise that boy or that girl to be like that. And depending on how conservative that family might be, they'll wash their hands of you totally. And it's like, can't be hanging around with that.
That's right.
Okay.
That didn't happen to me, by the way. My family loves me, all of them.
As well they should.
That's right.
So there's nothing on the books that's hampering any of this from progressing forward. I mean, we don't have any laws that are that need to be modified or changed that could be impacting this problem, as I see it.
Oh, there's one called the United States Constitution, right? If we really want to go there. But there absolutely are laws and legislation and policy and folks that are, lobbyists and others that are working specifically in that space. There are a couple organizations. I'm not sure how the chat works. If I put it in the chat, will everybody see it or will just we see it? But a number of organizations that I want to lift up in this space here in North Carolina, and people who are doing the work on the policy level. And there is an organization called Emancipate NC, Emancipate North Carolina, that is part of a coalition of Black-led organizations. Emancipate NC, Don Blagrove is an attorney and advocate and fierce advocate, if you will, who is tackling some of the direct policy-related issues. Forward Justice is another organization that is a policy think tank that is co-led by a directly impacted person who is leading a lot of the voter disenfranchisement in the state of North Carolina. The NC Justice Policy Center is an organization that I often refer to and I often refer folks to that gives in layman's terms the translation of some of the policy that is underway. And there's a coalition called the Clean Slate North Carolina, which includes all three of those organizations that are working directly with legislators in Raleigh on key criminal justice and other reforms specifically. There is a statewide coalition called the Second Chance Alliance. That is a statewide coalition that is primarily led and guided by folks that have lived experience all across the state. The Second Chance Alliance is the body and coalition that pushed the Second Chance Act through a year and a half ago. So I highly recommend folks subscribe to the Second Chance Alliance. The Second Chance Alliance in September of 2021 launched a chapter here in Charlotte. I don't know if Omar is on today, but Omar Anke is the community organizer who is leading that work here in Charlotte. So there are lots of ways to get plugged into the folks who are focusing specifically on policy and legislation, and the folks who are ensuring that that direct lived experience is centered in that work and leading the way forward.
Yeah, and you can put it in chat. Just click on everyone and everybody will see it if you want to do that.
Okay. Okay. So I'll
Let's
drop
get some
links in the
questions
chat.
and answers here. I've been running my mouth and you all have too, so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. We got some some Q&As in here. We're gonna start off with Mick Alexander. And she asked, hi, Shachelle, imagewealthlive.com. That's not a question, but she's speaking to you, Shachelle.
Thank you.
Beatrice Burton. Okay, she asked for the overall recidivism rate. Does anybody have the overall recidivism rate at hand?
Yeah, according to the North Carolina Justice Center, which was in Chapel Hill, or still is in Chapel Hill, I believe, the 3-year recidivism rate in North Carolina is 40%. So 40% of folks who walk out from behind bars within 3 years, 40% of them are coming back. So that kind of points out the importance of getting those basics right for folks when they get out, which is housing, job, education, family. You know, you can put those 4 together, you can put people's lives back together, and you can cut down on that recidivism rate.
Okay. Tiffany Wright asked, my son is currently incarcerated in a federal facility. Are resources even more limited for people with any kind of sexual offense history?
Question. I don't have an answer to that.
Okay. So
I'm
Tiffany
sorry,
looks
I was
like
dropping
this.
links in the chat. What was the question?
The question is, my son is currently incarcerated in a federal facility. Are resources even more limited for people with any kind of sexual offense history?
I would say the short answer, are resources even more limited for people that will likely be on the registry when they are released? The short answer is yes. I am not as versed on the sexual offense, nor am I as versed on the federal system. However, if the person who asked the question is in the chat, I highly encourage you to reach out to Dawn at Emancipate NC, or send an inquiry to Forward Justice, and they can certainly help get you more definitive answers that are specific to folks that have spent time in BOP, in the Bureau of Prisons on the federal side.
Okay. We have Reverend Richard Clark. Are there any laws in North Carolina which protecting the rights of ex-offenders in seeking employment?
Are there any laws in the state of North Carolina that protect ex-offenders?
It says protecting the rights of ex-offenders in seeking employment.
So the Second Chance Act in North Carolina is primarily about expungement, so clean slate. There are some provisions in, and I'm not as versed on what explicitly those are, but in terms of protecting the rights of folks that are justice involved, I think with the early 90s changes of the sentencing structure in the state of North Carolina, is that it is very limited based on the type of offense itself.
And also just to add on to that, in terms of expungement, in our reporting, that was one of the areas that people, I guess, who are returning to civilian life often miss that opportunity for whatever reason, whether it's just the lack of access to folks who can help with that, or not exactly understanding what expungement is. And so that's one of those things where for some people, especially those folks who have not been convicted of a felony, where they can really help themselves with a little bit of access to expungement. And there are organizations around Mecklenburg County, well as the state, where folks are actively involved in helping folks get those criminal records expunged, which would go a long way towards knocking down that recidivism rate.
And I totally agree 100%. It reminds me to reiterate how the North Carolina Second Chance Alliance, in partnership with Forward Justice and Emancipate NC and others, are actually doing that work. I've actually been working with a young lady for almost 5 years now, who was able to get over 20 charges taken off of her record after she was released in 2020, with the assistance of the attorneys at Forward Justice as a part of that work. So subscribing to the North Carolina Second Chance Alliance and engaging with the Second Chance Alliance Charlotte chapter is one very real and direct and practical way to get involved in that work.
Interesting. Okay, we have Reverend Pamela Goodine. Peer Justice Initiative is also doing the work. So she's actually saying that this is another organization that's helping out in this, with these causes. And
Yeah.
Christopher, oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to lift up, and thank you for that, because Peer Justice Initiative, PJI, Amanda Martin, who is one of the homies, working scholar who is leading that work, she and others did a lot of national work to bring forensic peer support, which works at the intersection of justice involvement and mental health and substance use, to the state of North Carolina. And she and others are working across the state in partnership with many organizations to bring the PJI to the fore. So I'll thank you again for that. I'm going to find that link and drop it in the chat as well. Definitely another good resource.
So she put it in the Q&A. I think that's the link to it, but okay. Christopher Rashad Green asked a question, and then he reworded it. And his question is, aren't recidivism rates based on a 3-year window without reoffending? Did you all hear that question?
Yes,
And
it is based on a 3-year a 3-year stretch without going back into the system. So that 40% at any point in time over a 3-year window, that's 40% of the folks who have been formerly incarcerated will become reincarcerated.
Okay, so interesting. Okay. LaQuinna Downing, I work for a reentry council, and we are a liaison to services for justice involved and justice served individuals. Patrice said it perfectly about limited resources for those previously incarcerated. Those second chance opportunities in many segments, employment, housing, etc., are lacking or still non-existent. Our peer support specialists have been instrumental in assisting our participants with different services. As for some law enforcement, what I found is the difficulty with the idea of reentry and transitioning back into society, because they are trained to protect and serve, causing a huge disconnect in some but not all instances. Did everybody get that? That's interesting. That wasn't a question, but that was a good statement.
And I think that also speaks to the you talk about a disconnect where you have some law enforcement, especially, I guess, sheriff's departments, for instance, where some are providing some programs to help the incarcerated make that transition, for instance, in Mecklenburg County. But not every county or every sheriff's department is doing that type of work. So you have some counties, more than likely the urban ones that are trying to do the right thing and try to help people get prepared to get their lives back on track. And you have others who are like, hey, we're just here running the jails. And once you're out, this is no longer our problem. And we're not necessarily here to help you get to that point where you are no longer incarcerated.
So how much is paid involved with that whole process? I mean, if I'm getting paid more to handle that, I'm doing it. If I'm not, then I'm not. Is paid a part of that whole equation?
Well, just like any other law enforcement agency, it's all taxpayer dollars. And now you're talking about political will. And if you're looking at it from Mecklenburg County, for instance, the county pays for those types of programs to bring in business owners or entrepreneurs to help folks get themselves together and make that transition, get them prepared for work, for instance. Other counties may not be as rich economically as Mecklenburg, and so they're not necessarily in that position. Or you may have a sheriff as the leader of the jails in a county who doesn't care about this type of thing. All he or she is concerned with is making sure that the jail is secured. All this other stuff is a luxury that they figure their county can't afford or won't afford.
Okay. And LaQuinta wants to know, can we provide a list of resources that we can pass on to those justice involved? We are always open for additional resources.
In addition to those that have been dropped in the chat?
I'm assuming so, because, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways to connect with resources. And so I'll give a few. One, if you are sort of leaning toward the community-based mutual aid, for us, by us, centering the lived experience, we're gonna get it done, even though the systems and structures are designed to not see us win. There is a network of community that is doing that work. Several organizations locally that can connect you to that work. Beauty After the Bars, Tijuana Brown, Gemini Boyd and Jewel Hayden with Project Bolt, Kenny Robinson with Freedom Fighting Missionaries. Who else? Dr. Madeline McClinney with ExodusFoundation.org. There are a number of local organizations, and if you follow any of them on social media, you will likely be connected to other resources that I would put under sort of the bucket of mutual aid. Institutional resources, which I would include CCT as an institutional resource. I can drop our link in the resource, and our team can certainly answer questions and help guide and sit down and have a conversation about what's going on. Other institutional resources include the Job Resource Center at Goodwill Opportunity Campus. Center for Employment Opportunities is another reentry organization that is nationally based, that primarily works with vocational trade, but they too are also at the Goodwill Opportunity Campus. Charlotte Works is taking some concerted efforts from a workforce development standpoint to include the formerly incarcerated and people with criminal convictions as a part of the population of folks that they would define as folks that have barriers to employment. And Mecklenburg County Criminal Justice Services has the Reentry Partners of Mecklenburg, which is the local reentry council here in Mecklenburg County that is a part of the statewide network. At the statewide level, there is an effort, a coalition that was organized in 2017, 2018 by Governor Cooper called the State Reentry Council Collaborative, or the SRCC. You can go to the NCDPS website, or you can just type in State Reentry Council Collaborative in Google. And I was on the comms team, and the comms team is still working on a lot of resources to connect not any one particular county, but all 100 counties both from the local reentry council as well as community-based organizations. And so working at the intersection of a lot of the work that the Second Chance Alliance does in formalizing that to really demonstrate, the intention for partnership with the Department of Public Safety and other actors that are in the system. So there are lots of resources out there. I'll throw myself in there. I self-educated when I got into this work. And so there's a lot in my head that we probably don't have time for today. But I'm certainly happy to have conversation with anybody that is looking to join us in the rabbit hole of changing the way that we look at this entire system and reimagining something new.
Yeah, we need to be reimagining, that's for sure. We got Betty Corbett, Community Success Initiative. Dennis Gaddy is another one, I guess. And Dora Clayton, my organization, Wounded Healers of North Carolina, is changing the narrative of recidivism. We are an organization operated and run by formerly incarcerated persons. We want to thank you for the discussion and hope we have continued dialogue. Okay, yes, we can. We can provide that information about your organization, not a problem. And Betty Corbett also said Dennis organization is in Raleigh. So that's Wake County, and just to serve Diana Powell in Raleigh. Sorry for using Q&A, but my chat is not working. Don't worry, we're only taking questions through Q&A, so that's fine. Okay, that's all the Q&A for now. I have a couple of questions that I'll be done with, but you all heard you reported on this. Shachelle, you sort of lived this. Patrice, you've been active in just trying to cure this in several different ways. And this is for each of you to answer. And going through all of this, and we're gonna start with you again, Herb. If there was one thing that you have seen or done with your reporting and all of this that stood out to you, what would be one thing you would recommend that you would like to see changed with this whole system?
Well,
Just one. Give me two or three. Just one.
absolutely. You can't legislate your way around it. I think people need to have an open mind and look at folks on a personal level when it comes to the formerly incarcerated. A crook is not always a crook, and these are real people, and they have an adjustment to make. And it's up to us whether we are related to them, whether they're friends or former friends that need to be reconnected to them, or employers or whatever. We need to look at these folks as people, and none of us are going to be perfect. Some of us have been formerly incarcerated, and people need to just stop lumping everybody into that one bucket. And I know it's easy to say that, but in a society where we still have issues of racism, sexism, and ageism, I would say we also have an issue with formerly incarceratedism, and we need to deal with that as well.
Excellent. Shachelle.
For me, I agree with Herb, right? See us for who we are. Don't expect that to be a part of our conversation, because that is something that happened in the past. It's not our present, and it's definitely not our future. So kind of to include what Patrice was saying, meet us where we are, right? And give us the opportunity to do whatever it is that we can do, right? To show that we are worth someone taking a risk on, right? We are worth someone taking the time to interview us, to talk to us, worth someone taking the time to see if we can be successful in whatever housing that is available for us, right? So just give us the opportunity to participate, to be there with everyone else.
Excellent. Now, before I go to Patrice about this, I wanna further down this line with you, because do you think, and this is for you to answer, but this is not directly talking about you. But do
Right.
you think that people who won't talk about this because what they think the repercussions might be is part of the problem of people not knowing people that are incarcerated, that they could learn a lot about that person? Say, well, I got the wrong opinion about this. And so it's sort of a two-edged sword. People that are incarcerated aren't talking about it, so people don't know, but you aren't talking about it because you're afraid of what's going to happen. But then at the same time, people don't know that great people like you have been down that road and look at you now. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. Tell me about what you think about that.
It is, and I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of not talking about it. Probably whenever I was asked to do the interview with Herb and Ashley was the first time that I had ever really opened up about it to anybody outside of my family unit. And that is absolutely true. I am nervous and still nervous, even, to this day. And I've had some success with my business, right? I appreciate you guys, lifting me up in the way that you do, but I'm modest about it. I've had some success, and even at this level, for me, I'm still nervous to talk about it. I'm still nervous to bring it up in my business groups, right? Because these are men and women who haven't experienced this. They don't have a cousin or whatever, right? These are white men and white women. And so they don't understand. But to your point, I am very nervous about bringing it up because it's sad to say, but it's kind of shameful for me. It is. And I haven't gotten used to it. I haven't gotten comfortable enough, with myself and where I am to share it just, in conversations. And I have a lot of people that encourage me to share. And I'm going to start doing better, right? As we move forward in 2022. Patrice she's like, let's go. I got you, sister, and all of this. But I aspire to be on the same level that she is and talking about these things, because I believe that there's power in having a conversation. It's power in sharing, not just my story, but some of the stories of people that I know that are close to me. It's power in sharing those stories. And it will open more doors, but it's still a very difficult conversation for people to have. It's a very difficult conversation for people to accept and, determine how they're going to deal with it to interact with me. I've seen people, even in the last week or so, I've seen people, my doctor, just kind of, oh, really? And, it's just a subtle, it wasn't subtle, it was very, very clear to me. And it made me uncomfortable. I didn't say anything about it, but, it's one of those things where, okay, I won't be going back.
That's the point. That's great. That's what you are inspiration to me. Let me just put that on the table.
Well, thank you.
Patrice, what's the one thing? I mean, you got a lot of things. So what's the one that just stands out to you that you want to see changed?
Tell the truth. I just want people, wherever you are in the journey of either understanding it as an advocate or finding your space in terms of, someone with lived experience that is navigating, is tell the truth. Some people are on the side of criminal justice reform. Many are on the side of abolition. Somewhere in the middle or on one end of the spectrum is what new and different will be. But in the meantime, as Michelle Alexander says, the system is recalibrating. right? We figured out mass incarcerations in cages didn't work. And so now we're discovering in real time, as these conversations are happening, the ways in which we can over surveil folks through technology. And so the one thing that I think is foundational and rooted in the soil that will address all the things is tell the truth. This is too big, it's too much, I don't know, right? Like that, if that's your truth, then say that. If you are someone on the side of advocacy, and because this is a national conversation and you want to save everybody, then you probably live in the saviorism space. Ask the person who is directly impacted, do you want to be saved, before you decide to save them? Seeing people and valuing people for their stories. Seychelle and I have had a little bit of conversation about some of her apprehension, and she's absolutely right. Whenever and wherever and however you want to tell your story, I got you. And there's a whole community out here of people who are advocates and people who have direct experience that got you. And so sometimes it's about holding space and making sure that people know that they still have agency in this work. And for me, all of that lives in telling the truth.
I'm impressed with you too. I mean, this has been a great conversation, and I've always been impressed with her. He's been around me forever, but we got a couple more questions before we have to end this, and I want to get them all in before we go. Well, the last one down here from Natasha Hemingway says she's so proud of you, Seychelle. So I wanted you to know that. LaQuinta Downey is here. She, again, thank you so much for the feedback. Our Guilford County, local reentry county, is supported by the Sheriff's Office. That's great to hear. Renee Johnson, thank you for the opportunity to listen to these very important issues. Please know that I am an advocate for the population of City Council. I'm fighting to remove systemic barriers in employment and housing in the city of Charlotte. Please feel free to contact me if I can ever assist. Okay, great, Renee, we appreciate that. And Jennifer Tubbs, you are number goals, Patrice. So that was
Okay.
You know JT?
I don't.
Okay. Okay, now the only other thing that I have, unless you all have some more that you want to express that we didn't cover tonight, we do want a call to action. I think we've covered some of the call to actions, but as a community and hearing this story, there are some things that as individuals we can do to help with this whole cause and situation, because it's personally, it's sort of disturbing for me to see this take place like this. And we just need to know what can be done to help in this situation. And we got a couple of, at the last slide, we have a couple of call to action items. But if you all got some more that you want to talk about, let's hear them now before we close out, because I think we can, this is going to be recorded and released to everybody that registered. We didn't have 200 attend, but we had over 200 people registered for this event. So they all will get the recording. And if you got something that you want to say in terms of a call to action that we as individuals can do to help with this situation, I would love to hear them now. And I promise it's the final thing I'm gonna ask of you. Unless I find something else before we close, then I want to ask that too. But let's go ahead with, you got a call to action.
Well, I'll start. And what I will say is, for everyone that is interested in this work, that wants to help and push this work forward, Patrice has laid out so many organizations, and they can't do what they do without money, money, money. They like, whatever you can do to help is always welcome. And a lot of these organizations, most of them are nonprofits. And so if a lot of times we can't donate money, we can definitely donate our time. And that's just as valuable in these situations, because there's so much work to be done. So take a look at all of the links that Patrice has shared and others have shared, and wherever you feel compelled to start, just jump in there and support them from a monetary standpoint or from a donation of your time. They are all very, very amazing organizations and they need the help.
Excellent, excellent. Patrice, you want to add anything to that?
I would say for anyone who is working at an employer or at a business to simply ask the question, what is our position on fair chance hiring? And start the dialogue internal in your companies. And similarly, there are organizations, CCT and all those that I mentioned in the chat that can help you have those conversations. And I think that is a simple and practical way for people to engage in this work inside of their employers that continues to create pathways for folks that are looking to find jobs or sell their products if they decide to go the entrepreneurship route.
Excellent, excellent. Herbert?
Well, I would throw in that people can still or should even consider getting involved on the front end of these things in terms of reaching out to not only business leaders, but your political leaders who make these laws that come back and create these barriers in the first place. Mass incarceration has been proven to be a failure. You can't lock up all these folks and not expect some ramifications on the back end. So I would suggest that there needs to be more of a push in terms of reaching out to your political leaders, whether they're on the local level, the state, or even the federal. Votes matter. And when you have people who are engaged, clamoring for these changes, the chances of change happening goes up.
Excellent, excellent conversation. To close this out, we do have two more in the Q&A. They aren't questions. They're complimenting the ladies here. They said, no question, just a comment. Both ladies who just talked are women of wisdom. I'm grateful for you. I own a staffing company designed to employ former offenders. So great. And Ben Coulter said, this has been incredibly insightful and truly appreciate the resources and sharing. He's the chancellor of Western Governors University, North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina. And Ben Corbett said, Family Resource Center, South Atlantic, Derek Bird is ED, has re-entry programs that should be functioning in several counties that provide some direct and indirect services. And now the Q&A as well as the chat will be a part of the recording that we will send out to everybody. So everybody will get to see the recording as well as see the links that have been shared here. And I'm gonna turn it back over to the ladies that are hosting this, but I have been deeply inspired and moved by this conversation. I appreciate all of you and the work that you continue to do. And it's been uplifting and very informative. And you all can just do this for yourself. You pat yourself on the back. I can't reach you, so I would do it, but you pat yourself. Thank you all for this. It's been enjoyable and very informative. And I'm out. I'm proud. I'm proud of you ladies. Herb, forget you, but I'm proud of you ladies.
And we'll take that up later.
This has been a great conversation.
Yes, it has. Thank you guys for the opportunity to share my story and to give me this platform to motivate myself to share a little more and share in different spaces. So thank you.
Oh, and one more thing too, Ramona Brandt Day is tomorrow. And so if this is a local type of thing where Patrice is more knowledgeable about it than any of us. So why don't you handle that part of the information?
Yeah, thank you, Herb. And again, I also want to express deep gratitude and appreciation for the invitation to be a part of the conversation today. Ramona Brandt, many of you on the call know Ramona Brandt. Ramona Brandt is a woman who was issued a life sentence for a first-time drug conspiracy charge in the late 90s. And in February of 2016, she was pardoned by President Obama. On February 25th, 2018, Ramona unexpectedly died. And last year, I wrote a proclamation for the city of Charlotte to recognize February 25th as Ramona Brandt Day. Ramona was someone who I met through the Second Chance Alliance in 2017. And I learned about several organizations nationally, including the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, which is a national organization that works to end the incarceration of women and girls. And so in honor of Ramona's legacy, tomorrow is the second official, as proclaimed by the city of Charlotte, Ramona Brandt Day. And we're asking folks to wear purple tomorrow. And also, if you do know Ramona, post on social media and use the hashtag Ramona Brandt Day. She is our sister, and we are continuing the work unapologetically to end the incarceration of women and girls and also free everyone. Thank you for letting me share that.
I got my purple today.
It's tomorrow, Herb.
I know, but I'm
I
celebrating.
peeped that. I peeped that Herb earlier.
I'm celebrating early. Turn it into a 4-day weekend.
There you go.
Okay, ladies, Linda and Michelle, you can close her out. Thank you
All
all
right.
again. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Sashelle and Patrice, for all your information. That was very enlightening. And Sashelle, tell your story, girl.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And thanks for all of the resources, Patrice, that you put in the chat.
Mhm.
We have a couple upcoming events. Tomorrow, it is Meet the Press with the Charlotte Post Publishing Company. So you can come on by and check us all out and see what we're doing. It will be at 2 p.m. And also next month is Women's Month, and we will be hosting some events. Stay tuned for that. We are still in the process of getting the dates and times confirmed. So just stop by our website, that's also in the chat, and see what we're up to.
Mhm.
Thank you, ladies. This has been a great conversation. And I will turn it over to Linda to close us out. You're on.
We didn't hear you, but thank you anyway. We are
Come back. I said that was a great conversation, ladies, and definitely inspiring. Keep on telling the story. Here's our contact information. If you need more information about the Charlotte Post and the Triangle Tribune newspaper, we have information on this slide deck here for you. Please contact us. We'd love to share more information as well. And on behalf of the Charlotte Post Publishing Company, Gerald Johnson, Herbert White, Michelle, and myself this evening, we thank everyone for taking the time to join us in our celebration of Black History Month, which we say our history is Black history all year long. These ladies shared a whole lot of light on conversations that are difficult in our community. So we must continue to share. So thank you. And come join us tomorrow if you're available tomorrow afternoon for our webinar, Meet the Press. Thank you. So this concludes our show.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Excellent.
Excellent.